I wasn't planning to tell this story. Some things they don't leave your mind. They live in you. Quiet at first, then louder over time. It's been almost a year since that night. I still hear the door click. Still remember the way my breath froze in my chest. I didn't ask for this. I didn't expect it. And no part of me felt proud about what happened. But I won't lie. I think I stopped feeling normal long before any of it even began. Before I go any further, I want to be clear. This story deals with family tension, emotional pain, and infidelity. If any of those subjects make you uncomfortable, I completely understand. You might want to stop watching here. But if you're still here, I'll tell you exactly how it happened. The house got quiet after Dad left. Like haunting quiet. I was 17, living in Asheville, North Carolina, when he packed up and left us with nothing but silence. No warning. No big fight. Just gone. One minute we were watching TV after dinner. The next he was a ghost in the driveway, shutting the door behind him without a word. Mom didn't cry in front of me, not even once. She washed the dishes that night like everything was normal. But I remember the way her fingers trembled under the faucet. I saw it. I just didn't know what to say. That's kind of how it stayed. Me watching her. And her pretending not to be broken. Mom Hazel was always the strong one. She did everything. Worked 2 jobs. Paid the bills. Grocery runs, laundry, birthday cakes. All of it. But after Dad left, something shifted. Not all at once. Just little things. She stopped doing her hair. Stopped singing in the kitchen like she used to. She still smiled at the neighbors, but the light behind her eyes, it faded. I didn't see it then, but she was grieving. Not just for him. For who she used to be. I remember one summer years ago, before everything fell apart. We went to a lake, just the 3 of us. Dad grilled burgers on the dock. Mom wore this flowy blue sundress and kept yelling at him not to splash her with water. She laughed all day. Her skin glowing in the sun. And I remember thinking, she looks like someone out of a magazine. That was the last time I remember her looking free. I turned 18 the winter after Dad left. It was just me and Hazel in that house. 2 strangers who used to be a family. I spent most of my time in my room. Had this little fridge in the corner. Nothing fancy, just snacks and energy drinks. Told her it was so I wouldn't bug her. Truth is, I didn't want to be around her. Or maybe, I didn't want her to be around me. There was guilt in her eyes every time we made eye contact. Like she felt sorry for dragging me into the wreckage of her life. But what she never saw was that I felt the same way. At 18, you're supposed to feel like a man. I didn't. I felt small, confused, hormonal as hell. And mostly, angry. Angry at him, at her, at myself. I hated how often I thought about girls. Or rather, how I didn't have any. At school I was wallpaper. At home there was no one. Just Hazel moving through the kitchen like a ghost. Oversized sweaters. Hair tied back like she wanted to disappear. We barely talked. Some nights she'd knock gently on my door. Leave a sandwich or a slice of leftover pie near the hallway wall. And walk away. I never said thank you. I should have. But I was stubborn. Maybe scared. Scared that if I opened my mouth, all my confusion would spill out. Hazel wasn't just my mother. Not anymore. She was this presence. Someone I didn't recognize. And I'd catch myself staring when she bent over to grab something from the bottom cabinet. I'm not proud of that. But when you're 18, desperate for touch, and the only person near you starts looking like a woman again, something messes with your head. I hated myself for it. But it happened. Again. And again. She didn't deserve what came next. Neither did I. But that's where this story begins. In a house full of silence. 2 broken people. And one night. That would ruin everything we thought we understood. If you're still here, I'll tell you exactly how it happened. Don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this. Trust me, there's so much more to uncover. There's something about being alone that starts to rot your mind if you sit in it too long. First it feels like peace. No questions. No interruptions. No expectations. Just you and the silence. But then, the silence gets heavy. Starts talking to you. Feeding your worst thoughts. That's where I lived. Every single day. After school. I'd come home and go straight to my room, like it was a bunker, like I was trying to outlive the war inside my own house. I'd shut the door and barely move for hours. Sometimes I'd scroll my phone until the battery died. Other times I'd just stare at the ceiling fan, watching it spin, counting the blades. Anything to avoid thinking. Anything to stop myself from going out there and seeing her. Hazel. She tried at first. I won't lie and say she didn't. She'd knock sometimes, soft like she didn't want to wake something. She'd call out, ask if I wanted dinner. Sometimes I'd pretend not to hear. Other times I'd grunt. Most nights, I waited until I heard her leave the kitchen. Then I'd sneak out, heat something up. We existed like strangers in the same house, orbiting around each other, never touching. And in the middle of all that cold space was that little fridge in my room, just humming quietly, always full of the same three things: bottled water, protein shakes, leftover sandwiches. First it was practical, but over time, it became something else. A symbol, a wall, a way to keep her out. It buzzed all night, even when everything else was still. That hum, it was the only sound I heard in the dark. Funny how something so small can become the loudest thing in your world. Small things can feel huge in a quiet room. I could feel her watching me sometimes, not in a creepy way, more like she wanted to reach out but didn't know how. She'd linger in the hallway, standing there with a laundry basket or a mug of tea, probably working up the nerve to knock. Some nights she would. Most nights she wouldn't. And the nights she didn't, those were worse, because I'd lie there wondering why. I'd picture her in the living room, curled up on the couch under one of those old college blankets, staring at the TV without really watching, crying maybe, when she thought I wouldn't hear, probably blaming herself for everything she never said out loud. And me? I just lay there, pretending none of it mattered, pretending I wasn't thinking about her. Then came that night. I don't remember the day of the week, it doesn't matter, but I remember the smell. She had baked something sweet, banana bread, maybe muffins. I hadn't eaten since the day before, and I think she knew. She knocked once, didn't wait for a reply, then pushed the door open. She walked in holding a small plate, still warm, said she thought I might be hungry. Her voice was soft, like she was apologizing just for existing. She looked different that night. Same robe, same tired face, but something felt off. Or maybe it was me that was off. She glanced at the towels on the floor, didn't say a word, just placed the plate on my nightstand, and stood there, awkward, like she wanted to speak, but kept choking on the words. And then, quietly, she asked, "Are you okay?" I shrugged, didn't look at her, just stared at the wall, like it held some answer I couldn't find. She looked around my room, the dark curtains, the humming fridge, the pile of clothes in the chair I never used. Then her eyes landed on me, on the shape under the blanket. "Were you doing something?" she asked. Her tone wasn't angry. It wasn't judging. It was something else. Concern, confusion, maybe even curiosity. I said no. Of course I said no, even though we both knew that wasn't true. She paused, looked like she didn't quite believe me, but then she nodded just once and said she'd leave me alone. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. She walked out without closing the door all the way. That was new. She always closed it before. But not that time. She left it cracked, like part of her was still in the room, like some invisible thread between us needed to stay. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing there. I could still smell her perfume, faintly floral, a little powdery. That scent clung to the room, long after she was gone. And the worst part? I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel ashamed. I felt seen. For the first time in months, someone looked at me and didn't turn away. The next day everything was off. She didn't bring it up, didn't act like anything happened, but something had shifted. She knocked on my door twice that day. Once in the morning with scrambled eggs, once at night with some folded clothes. She lingered each time. Her voice sounded warmer, and I caught myself watching her. Not just glancing, watching. The way her fingers moved when she adjusted her sleeves. The way her hair slipped over her shoulder when she leaned forward. And it made me feel disgusting. This was Hazel. My mother. The woman who raised me. Who held me through fevers. Who packed my lunch in 3rd grade. Who kissed my knees when I scraped them on the sidewalk. And yet, there I was, imagining things I shouldn't. That night I stood in front of the fridge. Opened it. Cold air hit my face like a slap. I just stood there. Staring at the same things. Water. Leftover sandwiches. Banana bread. I didn't want any of it. What I wanted, I couldn't say out loud. Not even to myself. I'd love to say I was just lying in bed that night. Like any normal kid. Scrolling through my phone. Mind somewhere far from the edge. I kept dancing on. But that would be a lie. I'd been in my room for hours. Lights low. Curtains drawn. Door shut tight this time. And the hum of the fridge was louder than usual. Or maybe I just noticed it more. Because my breathing was shallow, uneven. It had become a routine I never talked about. A way to release all the tension that built up during the day. The confusion. The loneliness. The hunger. Not just physical. The kind of hunger that presses on your chest until you have no choice but to respond. I thought I was alone. I was sure I'd locked the door. Or at least I thought I had. And then she came in. Hazel. Mom. She had a laundry basket in her hands. Her arms were full. And I thought I heard her humming to herself. Something soft, almost sweet. Maybe trying to fill the house with something. That didn't feel so heavy. Then the door opened. Just like that. Her feet crossed the threshold. I was mid-motion. Half covered. Everything about me raw and unprepared. I froze. Hands still. Eyes wide. Pulse racing like my heart might explode. She stopped. The laundry slipped from her hands. The sound of the basket hitting the floor barely registered. All I saw were her eyes. The way they widened. The way her breath caught. Just enough to break the silence. She didn't scream. Didn't scold. Didn't flinch. She just stood there. Staring. Her gaze dropped slowly. Hesitant. Taking in the state of the room. The mess. The towels. The shape of my body curled under the blanket. Trying to disappear. There was no hiding. No pretending. Time didn't just slow down. It stopped. I was locked in place. Paralyzed with shame. I wanted the earth to swallow me whole. To rewind everything. To undo every choice that had brought us here. But she didn't turn and leave. She should have. That's what anyone else would have done. Back away, close the door. Erase the moment. But Hazel didn't leave. She stood there frozen. Not in shock. But in sadness. Her eyes didn't meet mine. They stayed low. Like she was trying to understand something. Even she didn't have words for. And in that moment, she didn't look like my mother. Not the woman who made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Not the woman who sang 90s love songs while folding laundry. Not the woman who whispered prayers into the sink the night Dad left. No, this woman looked lost. Raw. Like she was unraveling quietly on the inside. She blinked hard. Took a slow breath. Like surfacing from a deep underwater dream. Are you okay? Her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't answer. My throat was tight. Every muscle in my body was clenched. I felt like I was made of stone. I didn't want to cry. But I think I was close. And still, she didn't leave. She looked down again. Not with disgust. Not with judgment. But with something else. Maybe recognition. Maybe regret. Her hand trembled slightly. As she brushed the edge of her sleeve. She stepped forward. Not far. Just enough that I could smell her perfume again. Faint. Floral. A little powdery. And familiar. She reached out. But stopped midway. Her hand hovered. Then slowly dropped to her side. She looked at me again. This time not searching for guilt or answers. Just trying to understand. Then she did something I didn't expect. She sat. Right at the edge of the bed. Slowly. Gently. Not like someone intruding. Not like someone crossing a line. But like someone who didn't know where else to go anymore. And I still didn't move. Because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Cry. Run. Apologize. Instead I just lay there. My heart pounding so loudly. It echoed in my ears. She didn't speak again. She didn't touch me. She just sat, fingers curled in her lap, eyes fixed on some invisible point in the room. And something shifted. Something quiet. Something unspoken. Looking back, I think I know what that silence was. It was the sound of two people, realizing they'd been holding their breath for way too long. If I could tell you where it all began, I would. But it wasn't a single moment. Not one mistake. It was a slow drift. An ache that grew louder over time. Two lonely people, living in the same house, losing pieces of themselves, bit by bit, until the silence became unbearable. In the weeks that followed, I started to breathe again. Not fully, not easily, but enough to notice it. One night I told Kays. Not everything. Not yet. Just pieces. The parts one could say. Without breaking. And he didn't judge me. He just sat with me. Listen. And I realized. That's what I had needed all along. Someone to sit next to me. Without demanding answers. Hazel kept her promise. She went to therapy. Started facing herself. Stopped avoiding the mirror. A few months later, she wrote me a letter. Not to ask for forgiveness. Just to tell the truth. To explain. To be real. She said she was learning how to live with what she did. And she hoped that one day, I could live without letting it define me. I haven't written her back. Not yet. Not because I hate her. But because I'm still healing. I talk more now. I sleep a little better. I take long walks in the evening. Just to clear my head. Sometimes I still wake up in a cold sweat. Sometimes I hear the hum of the fridge. And it pulls me right back. To a place I never asked to be. But I'm learning. Healing isn't a straight line. And I don't have to be ashamed of the fact that I'm not okay. Not all the time. Some wounds don't bleed. They don't bruise. They don't scar where others can see them. They live beneath the skin. Quiet. Persistent. Waiting to be acknowledged. But real healing starts the moment you stop hiding from the pain. The moment you say it out loud. The moment someone sees the worst in you and doesn't look away. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. I know this wasn't an easy story to hear. It wasn't easy to tell. But now, I want to ask you something. What would you have done if someone you trusted, someone who was supposed to protect you, crossed that line? Could you forgive them? Would you ever speak to them again? Do you think Hazel deserves forgiveness? Or are some things just too far gone? And if you've ever lived through a complicated family dynamic, one full of silence, confusion, or pain, share your story in the comments. Someone out there might feel a little less alone just by hearing yours. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it moved you. We tell these stories not to shock, but to understand, to bring light into the corners most people are too afraid to look into, and maybe, just maybe, to help someone begin again.